Let me tell you something that took me years of clinical practice to fully understand, and that I now consider one of the most important things I can tell any man over 60. The reason your erections changed, the reason the reliability disappeared, the reason the firmness faded, the reason the spontaneous physical response you used to take for granted now feels like something from another chapter of your life. It has almost nothing to do with your age. And it has almost nothing to do with your testosterone. I know that contradicts most of what you have probably been told. I know that goes against the conventional story. But I am a urologist. I have been doing this for over 20 years. And the conventional story is incomplete in a way that has cost millions of men years of their lives. Years they spent accepting a decline that was never inevitable, grieving something that was never actually gone. My name is Dr. May Anderson, and today I want to give you the complete story. I want to show you what is actually happening inside the specific arteries responsible for your erections, why it happens, and how a 2-ingredient combination that costs less than $5 can begin to reverse that process at the cellular level. Even in men who are 70, 75, even older. Not because I am selling you something. Because the biology supports it, the research supports it, and because men over 60 deserve to understand their own bodies with the same level of honesty and specificity that younger men take for granted. Stay with me through this entire video, because what I am going to share in the second half, specifically how these 2 ingredients work together in a way that neither achieves alone, and exactly how to prepare them so that the active compounds actually reach your vascular tissue, is the part that most content on this topic either misses entirely or gets completely wrong. The preparation details are not a minor footnote. They are the difference between this working and this doing nothing. So stay with me. Here is what is actually happening inside your body, and I want to explain this carefully because once you understand the mechanism, everything else in this video will make complete sense. Your erection is, at its most fundamental level, a hydraulic event. That is not a crude simplification. That is the precise clinical reality. It depends on blood, a specific volume of blood, flowing into the erectile tissue at sufficient pressure and volume to create and sustain firmness. That blood flow is controlled by a network of small arteries, the penile arteries, and those arteries are governed by a single, extraordinarily thin layer of cells on their inner lining. That layer is called the endothelium. And the endothelium is the key to everything I am going to tell you today. The endothelium is not passive tissue. It is not simply a smooth surface that blood slides past. It is one of the most metabolically active systems in the entire human body, and its primary job, among many critical jobs, is to produce a molecule called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the signal your blood vessels use to relax, to widen, and to allow blood to flow freely in the volumes that your tissues need. Without adequate nitric oxide, your arteries stay partially constricted. Blood flow is reduced, pressure is insufficient, and the hydraulic event that produces a firm erection either does not fully happen, or does not sustain long enough to matter. This is the mechanism. This is what is actually happening to most men who experience age-related changes in erectile function. Not primarily a hormone problem, not primarily a psychological problem, an endothelial problem. Specifically, a failure of the cells lining your penile arteries to produce sufficient nitric oxide. And I want you to sit with that for a moment, because it is genuinely important. If the problem were simply testosterone, testosterone replacement therapy would have a near-perfect success rate in restoring erectile function. It does not, because testosterone is upstream of the mechanism. Nitric oxide is the mechanism itself. After the age of 40, nitric oxide production begins a measurable decline. After 50, that decline accelerates meaningfully. After 60, the average man has lost a very significant portion of the nitric oxide output he had in his 30s. And the penile arteries, being among the smallest arterial structures in the body, are the first to feel the full consequences of that decline. This is why erectile changes so often appear years, sometimes a decade or more, before a man is diagnosed with any cardiovascular condition. Urologists have known for a long time that erectile dysfunction is frequently the earliest visible signal of systemic endothelial dysfunction. The penile arteries show the damage first, because they are the most sensitive. They are the canary. And most men, and unfortunately many general practitioners, hear that canary and respond by treating the symptom rather than investigating the underlying biology. Now here is the part that changes everything. The part of this story that most men never reach because the conversation usually ends at the diagnosis rather than the mechanism. The endothelium is not dead tissue. It is not permanently or irreversibly broken. These cells retain a remarkable capacity to regenerate, to recover function, and to increase nitric oxide output, but only when they receive the specific biological inputs that allow them to do so. And most men never provide those inputs, not because they are not motivated, not because they do not care about their health, but because no one ever explained what those inputs are or why they matter. The medical system reaches for a prescription. The supplement industry reaches for your wallet. And in between those two responses, the actual biology, the recoverable, addressable, genuinely hopeful biology, gets completely overlooked. That is what I am here to change today. And I want to start by introducing you to a compound that most men have never heard of, because understanding it is the key to understanding why the first ingredient in this protocol works the way it does. The compound is called ADMA, asymmetric dimethylarginine. It is produced naturally inside your own body, which is what makes it so insidious. It is not something you are being exposed to from outside. It is something your own metabolism generates. And what ADMA does is block the enzyme responsible for producing nitric oxide. That enzyme is called eNOS, endothelial nitric oxide synthase, and it is literally the biological machinery that your endothelial cells use to manufacture nitric oxide. When ADMA levels are high, eNOS is suppressed. Nitric oxide output falls. Arteries stiffen. Blood flow diminishes. And ADMA levels rise with age, with oxidative stress, and with the chronic low-grade inflammation that accumulates silently in virtually every man's vascular system over decades. Most men walking around right now with significantly elevated ADMA have no idea it exists. They have never had it tested. Their doctor has never mentioned it. And yet it is one of the primary biological drivers of the vascular decline that is directly responsible for what they are experiencing. Here is something else worth knowing about ADMA that makes this even more frustrating. It does not cause pain. It does not cause fatigue in the obvious way. It does not show up on a standard blood panel. It operates invisibly, silently suppressing the one molecule your penile arteries depend on. And most men carry elevated levels for years before they ever understand why their body stopped responding the way it used to. What if there were a natural compound that directly inhibited ADMA and reactivated eNOS? There is. And it has been sitting in your kitchen since before you started watching this video. The first ingredient is raw garlic. Freshly crushed, raw garlic. And I want to be extremely precise about what I mean by that, because the form of garlic matters enormously, and the difference between the effective form and the ineffective form is something almost no health content explains correctly. When you crush a raw garlic clove, a chemical reaction is triggered between an enzyme called alliinase and a precursor compound called alliin. The product of that reaction is allicin, and allicin is the primary biologically active compound responsible for garlic's most powerful vascular effects. Here is what is critical to understand. Allicin does not exist in whole, uncut garlic. It is created at the moment of mechanical disruption, crushing, chopping, pressing. And it is destroyed within minutes by heat, which is why cooked garlic, for all its flavor and culinary value, produces only a fraction of the vascular benefit of raw garlic prepared correctly. The heat that caramelizes the sugars and mellows the bite is the same heat that eliminates the compound you actually need. What allicin does inside your endothelial cells operates through several distinct pathways, and understanding each one will help you appreciate why this is not simply folklore or traditional medicine being retrofitted with science. This is well-documented, mechanistically understood vascular pharmacology. First, allicin directly inhibits ADMA production. It picks the lock that was suppressing your nitric oxide synthesis, removing the primary endogenous blocker of eNOS activity. Second, allicin activates eNOS through a secondary pathway involving hydrogen sulfide, a gaseous signaling molecule that endothelial cells use to communicate with the smooth muscle surrounding blood vessels. Elevated hydrogen sulfide triggers a deeper and more durable relaxation of those smooth muscle cells, meaning the vasodilation effect, the opening of the arteries, is both stronger and longer lasting than what allisin's ADMA inhibition alone would produce. These two mechanisms operating simultaneously is part of why garlic's vascular effect exceeds what you would predict from either mechanism in isolation. Third, allicin has been shown in multiple peer-reviewed studies to measurably reduce arterial stiffness. Not theoretically, not in cell cultures, but in human subjects using flow-mediated dilation testing, which is the clinical gold standard for assessing arterial responsiveness and endothelial health. A study published in the Journal of Nutrition demonstrated that garlic supplementation produced significant improvements in endothelial function in men with established coronary artery disease. Research in the British Journal of Clinical Pharmacology documented measurable reductions in arterial stiffness following consistent garlic consumption. And this connection between coronary and penile arterial health is not incidental. It is biologically direct. The endothelial cells lining the penile arteries and those lining the coronary arteries are the same type of tissue, governed by the same molecular machinery, responding to the same compounds. Research demonstrating improved coronary endothelial function from garlic is physiologically also describing what is happening in the penile arterial system. The tissue is identical. The mechanism is identical. This is why cardiologists and urologists increasingly see erectile health not as a separate domain from cardiovascular health, but as the same domain measured in a different location. When a cardiologist tells a patient to support his vascular health, he is also, whether he says it or not, giving advice that directly affects that man's sexual function. The systems are not separate. They are one system expressing itself in different locations. Now I want to give you the single most important practical detail about garlic. The step that separates the men who experience a genuine vascular effect from the men who eat garlic regularly and feel nothing. After you crush a garlic clove, you must wait 10 minutes before eating it or combining it with anything else. This is not a preference or a suggestion. It is a biochemical requirement. The alliinase enzyme reaction that produces allicin from alliin requires approximately 10 minutes to reach completion at room temperature. If you crush the garlic and immediately eat it, or immediately add it to something acidic, or add it to the honey before that 10 minutes has elapsed, you interrupt the reaction and the allicin yield is dramatically reduced. In some studies by more than half. Crush it. Set a timer. Leave it completely undisturbed. Come back in 10 minutes. This is when it is biologically active and ready. This one step, consistently applied, is the difference between this protocol working and not working. I cannot emphasize it enough. The second ingredient is raw honey, and I want to be equally precise here because the form is just as important as it is with garlic, and most people are not using the right form. What is sold in most grocery stores as honey has been heated to temperatures that destroy its enzymatic activity, degrade its polyphenol content, and render it biologically similar to a flavored sugar syrup. It is palatable. It will sweeten things. It will not meaningfully support your vascular biology. Raw honey, thick, slightly cloudy, slow to pour, often beginning to crystallize, is a chemically different substance. The crystallization that many people mistake for a sign of spoilage is actually a sign of authenticity. Processed honey does not crystallize because the compounds responsible for crystallization have been destroyed. Raw honey crystallizes because those compounds are intact. When you are standing in a store choosing between 2 jars of honey, and one is perfectly clear and smooth, and the other is slightly cloudy and thicker, and maybe starting to granulate at the edges, buy the second one. That is the one that will do something for your body. Here is what raw honey does at the endothelial level, and why it is not simply a pleasant way to make the garlic more palatable. Raw honey contains a rich profile of polyphenolic compounds, flavonoids including quercetin, camphorol, and luteolin among others. These flavonoids have been studied extensively for their effects on endothelial function and nitric oxide bioavailability. And here is where raw honey's contribution to this protocol becomes genuinely elegant. Where allicin works primarily by removing the inhibitor of nitric oxide synthesis, clearing the ADMA roadblock and reactivating enos. Honey's polyphenol work through a completely different mechanism. They protect nitric oxide after it has been produced. This distinction matters enormously, and it is something I want to explain clearly because it is the reason this combination is more powerful than either ingredient alone. Nitric oxide is an extraordinarily unstable molecule. It exists for only a few seconds after being produced before it must reach its target, the smooth muscle cells surrounding the blood vessel walls, or be destroyed. In men with elevated oxidative stress, which includes virtually every man over 60 dealing with chronic low-grade vascular inflammation, free radicals in the bloodstream intercept and neutralize nitric oxide before it can complete its journey. This is a clinically important phenomenon. It means you can have endothelial cells that are technically producing nitric oxide and still experience poor arterial dilation and restricted blood flow, because the nitric oxide is being destroyed in transit before it accomplishes anything. It is like generating electricity, but having it dissipate before it reaches the device you are trying to power. The production is happening. The delivery is failing. And no amount of increasing production fixes a delivery problem. You have to address both ends simultaneously. Quercetin and the other flavonoids in raw honey are potent free radical scavengers. They neutralize the oxidative environment that destroys nitric oxide, extending the biological half-life of every molecule your endothelium produces. More nitric oxide surviving long enough to reach the smooth muscle means more vasodilation. More vasodilation means more blood flow. More blood flow means what you came here for. Raw honey is not just accompanying garlic in this protocol. It is protecting and extending the product of garlic's primary mechanism. These two ingredients are not additive. They are complementary at the mechanistic level, each addressing a part of the problem that the other does not. Raw honey also contains boron, a trace mineral that receives almost no mainstream nutritional attention, but has been studied in relation to testosterone bioavailability. Specifically, boron has been shown to reduce levels of sex hormone-binding globulin, the protein in the bloodstream that binds free testosterone and renders it biologically inactive. Many men over 60 have testosterone levels that are not dramatically deficient, but are functionally compromised because a disproportionate amount of their circulating testosterone is bound and unavailable. Reducing sex hormone-binding globulin increases free testosterone. Not by producing more, but by making more of what you have available to your tissues. And free testosterone directly supports the neurological signaling cascade that initiates arousal and the erection response. This is a secondary mechanism, not the primary one, but it compounds the primary vascular effect in a way that makes the overall result broader than pure blood flow improvement alone. And then there is the synergy between these two ingredients that I mentioned at the beginning. The specific way that honey makes garlic more effective that has nothing to do with either ingredient's direct vascular actions. Allicin is chemically unstable in the acidic environment of the stomach. Its absorption window after ingestion is narrow, and gastric acid begins degrading it fairly rapidly, which limits how much ultimately reaches the bloodstream and the vascular tissue where it needs to work. Raw honey addresses this problem through two mechanisms. First, its natural viscosity and sugar matrix slows gastric emptying, physically extending the time that allicin remains in contact with the absorptive surfaces of the upper digestive tract, increasing how much enters the bloodstream. Second, honey's enzymatic compounds create a mild buffering effect on gastric acidity that appears to reduce the rate of allicin degradation in the stomach. The result is that allicin consumed with raw honey reaches the bloodstream in higher concentrations and over a longer window than allicin consumed on its own. You are not simply taking two beneficial things together. You are using one ingredient to significantly enhance the bioavailability and effective dose of the other. This is pharmacological synergy, and it is the core reason that men who have previously tried garlic alone and noticed little effect frequently notice a meaningful difference when they use this combined protocol correctly. Now let me walk you through exactly how to prepare this, because the practical details are just as important as the biology, and I want to leave you with no ambiguity about how to do this correctly. Take 1 medium raw garlic clove, not a full bulb, 1 clove, and place it on a hard surface. Use the flat of a knife, the bottom of a glass, or the heel of your hand to crush it firmly. You are not mincing it at this stage. You are breaking the cell structure to trigger the alliinase reaction. You will notice the sharp, sulfurous smell beginning almost immediately. That is the allicin synthesis beginning. Now leave it. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Walk away. Do not add it to anything. Do not heat it. Do not stir it. Just leave it at room temperature undisturbed. While those 10 minutes are passing, measure out 1 tablespoon of raw unfiltered honey into a small bowl. After the 10 minutes are complete, you can finely chop the garlic if you prefer a less chunky texture. Then add it to the honey and stir until you have a rough paste. Eat the entire mixture. Do not leave residue in the bowl. Both the honey coating the bowl and any remaining garlic carry active compounds. Take a small sip of water afterward if needed, but do not immediately drink a full glass. You want the compounds to begin absorbing through the mucosal surfaces of the mouth and upper digestive tract before being diluted. The oral mucosa is a surprisingly efficient absorption route for both allicin and polyphenol, and drinking immediately after essentially bypasses this window. Take this every morning on an empty stomach or with a very light meal, and take it consistently, every day, not most days. The endothelial recovery this protocol supports is cumulative. It does not happen in one morning or 1 week. What you are doing is creating the daily biochemical conditions for a gradual restoration of vascular function in the penile arteries. Most men who follow this correctly and consistently begin noticing changes around the 3rd to 4th week. Not dramatic transformations, but the kinds of changes that are genuinely meaningful. Stronger morning erections, more reliable initiation of response, a firmness and duration that had quietly been declining for years beginning to quietly return. By 6 to 8 weeks, those improvements become more consistent, more predictable, and that predictability, that sense of being able to trust your own body again, is something men who have been dealing with this for years describe as one of the most significant changes, because the anxiety of not knowing how your body will respond on a given day is itself a powerful suppressor of the arousal response. Confidence and vascular health reinforce each other. When one improves, the other tends to follow. By 3 months of daily use, the cumulative effect of protecting nitric oxide, inhibiting ADMA, reducing arterial stiffness, and improving free testosterone availability creates a vascular and hormonal environment that is measurably different from where you started. If you want to enhance the protocol further, there are 2 additions worth knowing about. The first is a small pinch of black pepper added to the mixture. Black pepper contains a compound called piperine, which has been shown to enhance the intestinal absorption of sulfur-containing compounds, the class that includes allicin's metabolic derivatives. It is a modest addition but a real one, and it costs nothing. The second is upgrading to Manuka honey specifically, rated UMF 10 or higher, if it is accessible and within your budget. The methylglyoxal content in Manuka honey adds an anti-inflammatory mechanism that standard raw honey provides at lower concentrations, and its additional antibacterial properties appear to support a more favorable gut microbiome environment for polyphenol absorption. It is not required for the protocol to work, but if you want to maximize the effect, Manuka is the superior choice for the honey component. I also want to say something directly about the context this protocol works within, because I think being honest serves you better than telling you only what you want to hear. This combination works. The mechanism is real, the research is there, and the clinical logic is sound, but it works within a context. If you are consuming this every morning and then spending the rest of your day providing your endothelium with the same inputs that cause the damage, heavily processed foods, refined sugars, excessive alcohol, chronically poor sleep, you are fighting against yourself. You are trying to repair the pipe while the water damage continues. The garlic and honey protocol performs best when it is also supported by adequate sleep, because testosterone synthesis and endothelial cell regeneration both occur primarily during deep sleep, and are severely impaired without it. And by some form of regular movement, because physical activity remains the single most potent natural stimulator of nitric oxide production in the human body, more potent than any food or supplement I can name. You do not need to run marathons. You do not need a gym. A daily walk of 30 minutes produces measurable improvements in endothelial nitric oxide output over weeks. Add this protocol to that foundation, and the results compound in a way that neither produces alone. Before I close, if you have found this video genuinely useful, if this is the kind of honest, specific, mechanistically grounded information you have been looking for and not finding, please subscribe to Vital Health Seniors right now and hit the bell icon so you never miss what comes next. I publish content like this every single week, built around real physiology and real practicality for men over 50 who are done with vague advice and want to understand what is actually happening inside their bodies. It takes 5 seconds to subscribe, and it means this kind of information comes to you rather than you having to go looking for it. I want to close with something that I think matters beyond the biology. The men who struggle most with this issue are not struggling because they lack willpower or discipline. They are struggling because the information they were given was wrong, or incomplete, or delivered with a casual dismissiveness that communicated, without ever saying it directly, that the question was not really worth a serious answer. You deserve a serious answer. Your body is not finished. The penile arteries that have been narrowing for years still have endothelial cells that can recover. The nitric oxide pathway that has been suppressed by ADMA and oxidative stress can be reopened, not with a prescription that forces a single event and does nothing for the underlying biology, but with consistent, targeted daily nutritional support for the tissue that controls everything. 2 ingredients. Prepared correctly. Taken every morning without exception. That is what this is. Simple in execution, profound in mechanism, and genuinely available to every man watching this video right now, even at 75. Especially at 75. Now I want to hear from you. Before today, had you ever heard of ADMA? The compound your own body produces that suppresses nitric oxide, and is one of the primary drivers of this decline? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one, and understanding what you already know and what you did not helps me make every video I create more useful for you and for the thousands of men watching alongside you.